here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei in Beijing. We begin today's program with border skirmishes between China and India. The Chinese Ministry of National Defense maintains China has sovereignty over the Galwan Valley area. A defense ministry spokesperson said on Wednesday responsibility for the recent border clash was utterly on the Indian side, and China had always sought to safeguard peace and stability at the border. What does this incident mean for China-India ties in the long run? We invited guests for an in-depth discussion from both sides. How mature are relations between China and India? For answers, I'm joined by three panelists. Hu Shisheng, Director of the Institute of South Asian Studies of the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations. In Beijing also, Ye Hailin, Director of the Center for South Asia Studies with Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Meanwhile, we're also glad to be joined in New Delhi, India. Sri Kondapalli, who is a professor at the Center for East Asian Studies of Jawaharlal Nehru University. Welcome to the three of you. Let me start by asking our Indian guest, Professor Kondapalli, tell me more about how India is reacting to Chinese State Councilor Foreign Minister Wang's suggestion that two sides need to work together to look at the border issue and also to jointly maintain peace and tranquility in the border areas. That's a quote coming from the Chinese Foreign Minister. Professor.
I think it is a constructive suggestion, and in the meanwhile, there has been a consultative mechanism that has been in place. On June 6th, the local level commanders have met and decided about the process of disengagement and de-escalation in the western sector of the border. Secondly, there is also the diplomatic process. As you mentioned, the Foreign Minister Wang Yi and Dr. Jaishankar, the Indian Foreign Minister, they have met, and they have, at the bottom line of this discussion was to be responsible for the situation in the border areas. They have identified, and on June 22nd, once again, there was a meeting of the commanders, military commanders, and they formulated a policy of disengagement and de-escalation. So hopefully they will have some progress on this issue.
Hopefully. How big is that hope, Mr. Ye?
So we know there is no official border between China and India yet, but there is a LAC, line of action control. So different sides have a different understanding. That's natural and that's the reality. But we hope that both sides can take some measures to soften the situation. Okay. And through the statement made by the two ministers, we already feel there is some atmosphere and positive atmosphere around this issue. So I think the hope at least is 50, more than 50, I think. 50%.
More than 50%. Well, what's your opinion, Mr. Hu, from China?
Of course, that it shows that the top leaders from the two governments pay much attention to the calming down or cooling down of the tension, because the bilateral relations is too important. Especially at this juncture, the two governments need more cooperation in addressing so many non-traditional securities. But more important to me is that the implementation of any kinds of consensus and agreements on the ground. We know that the clashes, but before the clashes, we know there is a corps commander level talks and at least 4 points of agreements. But finally, because the local officers violate the consensus, so the clash followed. So the implementation, I think at this juncture, mostly important, especially at the LAC around the area.
Mr. Ye gave a percentage. He thought at least more than 50% likely there's going to be a very positive result. Mr. Hu, if you want to give a number?
No. Hope for what? I don't believe there will be a second China-Indian border war. But hope for what? If it is a war, okay, 100% there will be no war. If for another clashes like this scale, I think more or less there also be no another physical bloody clashes, but clashes will be there, face-off will be there, standoff will be there. I call it is a kind of new normal because the LSC have different understandings by each side. So there's still more efforts awaiting that to strengthen the control step by step along the LSC. So if there is control efforts from each side, this kind of standoffs, face-offs, even some kind of clashes will still happen.
Will still happen. So, Mr. Hu, you and Mr. Ye both have talked about the different understandings of the current line between the two countries. What exactly is China's understanding? Can you put it into words? The international community has a difficulty to understand exactly what is the nature of this recent conflict between China and India. What are these different understandings?
No, we can understand that normally between the two countries, there will be official border. The border will be recognized by the two governments and by the international community. But between China and India, there's no such kind of the official border. Still border dispute for decades. China and the Indians had a different, very unique case. That's we only between China and India. There's a LAC, means the line of actual control. Actual control means each side has their understanding on where is the so-called the border of their territory and as their claim, but not necessarily recognized by another side. And there is no official line between the two countries. So there is always some face-off or a crush. But luckily, the two countries has the very mature mechanism to maintain the situation through the discussion, negotiation, dialogue. So we see the LAC is not an official border, of course. When China and the India reached the agreement on the border, it took a very, very long time and a lot of tasks. But the LAC is there, and most of the parts of the dispute areas, the roughly LAC, where is the roughly the location, is still the two countries has the roughly understanding of the common sense.
Okay. LAC, the line of actual control. So exactly what is the Indian version, Professor Kandapalli, that has brought the two countries to the skirmishes, if I could use that word, recently?
Well, there have been a number of border talks between Chinese government and the Indian government officials. In 1960, there was a proposal from the Chinese side on the longitude, latitude of its version of the border. And for some reason, this has not been accepted. And then in 1981, we began 8 talks till 1987 at the very lower level in the foreign ministry on both sides. Then we graduated to a joint working group mechanism. 15 talks have been conducted on this issue of territorial dispute resolution. And since 2003, and more concretely from 2005, we have had 22 special representative meetings that were organized. The main purpose was to define the LSE and also the territorial dispute resolution ultimately. So despite these nearly 40 years of discussion, they were not able to find the LSE as of now, number one point. Number two, for the troops located in the actual ground, they do know where the line of actual control is. So I agree with Dr. A that there is a local understanding where their actual line of actual control is located.
Right.
Because when the border patrols, border guards, they have to operate, they do know where exactly is their map and the other side's perception of the LSE. However, the problem comes when it is weather related. It's almost 15 degrees, minus 15 degrees Celsius today in the place that they are operating. Sometimes it goes to minus 55 degrees centigrade. and the heights are about 14,000, 15,000 feet. So the problem is of weather. So generally the border patrols keep moving from one place to the other, and sometimes they do transgress.
I see.
So that is where the problem lies.
Okay. Let me have also Mr. Hu to explain to us, should weather be the factor? If it is the factor, should the two sides also be able to work out that factor? And meanwhile, should, some of the border patrol officers and soldiers of such a low level at any time hijack, if I could use that extreme word, the extremely important bilateral relations between China and India?
I don't think that the local officials purposely to hijack the bilateral relations. But anyway, because the local officials understanding the local conditions, local timing, so sometimes a little more assertive, aggressive, sometimes because of their own duties, they have to carry forward their the daily activities. They have their respective understandings about the local LLC. So although just now Professor Srikansa has listed all the mechanisms we have in the past, but the progress is still not that impressive. So it depends on both ends to work to the same direction. One is that the mechanisms still should be carried forward to maintain a general peace, to prevent the border issue to become to kidnap the bilateral relations. On the other side, I think we can take a positive view about the face-off and standoffs from the ground, because I personally tend to believe such kind of face-offs will finally help both sides to find where the exact locations or positions should be of the LLC gradually. Through this kind of face-offs, sometimes very fierce physical conflicts, then will help both sides to realize that that is the bottom line, that is the red line, or even the high voltage wire should not be touched upon. So gradually, after many rounds of face-offs, standoffs, even clashes, both sides gradually to realize where the exact locate of LLC should be. Then finally, the face-offs, standoffs, clash will be reduced to less and less. Let's look at each year's transpasses. We now see that 94% of the transpasses occurred in the western section. Why not in the eastern section and middle section? Because they already has demarcated by feet, by patrolling on the ground, where the LLC exactly located. So in the western section, because of the wire, the terrain, even barren land, the no grades of grass grows there. So it will need some patience. Let's see the clash after clash will finally lead to some more or less some certain kind of LLC on the ground.
Interesting opinion. You are suggesting political will becoming even stronger after some kinds of skirmishes as we have witnessed earlier, because both sides.
My point is that my basic point is that let's live with this kind of clash. If the colonel not launch the night strike, night raid, if not because of some landslides in the evening, I think such kind of scare of clash happening more regularly, but haven't led to such a kind of casualties. But because of the terrain, because of the night raid, because of the landslide, so everything come together to make it a big news, a big tragedy.
But isn't there danger, Mr. Hu, if I could just follow up a little bit about your thoughts? These kind of skirmishes might lead to harsh feelings from both sides toward one another, basically,
of course,
among the public, right? And then there could be more than fertile ground, or rather more active support for conflicts in both countries toward the other side. So, Mr. Hu, when you argue that we probably have to live with these kind of skirmishes, are you suggesting about the reality, or are you suggesting about solution?
I think it is one part of the solution in the future. But this kind of clash with so heavy characters should be avoided. But because I said some of the factors cannot be controlled, because of like the evening that should be avoided. Also like that free hand, this kind of policies should be avoided. And the no first shot should be strictly observed. Then this kind of clash we can live with. Each year there are several this kind of clashes happen, but not like this time have such a heavy impact upon bilateral relations, upon the feelings of the two peoples.
Professor Kantapali, quickly respond to your Chinese colleague.
I think there is a mechanism in place. In 1993, there is a peace and tranquility agreement. 1996, we signed agreement in the military field. And in 2005, we have also had an agreement of not taking firearms. And in 2013, we had a BDCA, Border Defense Cooperation Agreement, of not tailing the border patrols. The current problem is that the existing CBMs have not been enough. And at the Xiamen meeting of the BRICS in 2017, in the by-lanes, they decided to have new set of CBMs, confidence building measures. However, so far we have not been able to evolve nor implement these CBMs. So I think partly because of this reason, we have seen the tension. If we would have had more concrete CBMs, the problem could have not been arisen.
Mr. Ye, you've been attentively listening to your two other colleagues. Your thoughts? You know, what is the next step? Now we see both the foreign minister level as well as the defense minister level. They have either bilateral or in a multilateral platform, meeting bilaterally on or off the records over the past few days since the skirmishes happened. So can we expect some concrete result? Meanwhile, in India, if I could ask that, Mr. Ye, there has been, as some kinds of democracy works, a lot of different voices, if not noises, in the media, talking about these extreme actions. So, Mr. Ye, how both sides should calm down, and how should those people in the know lead the understanding about the situations in both countries?
Firstly, I think to solve the border dispute, each side should have the wisdom to resist the temptation of the populism. Do not try to use the border issue as the mechanism to mobilize their own people. I think that's the very important part for the final solution. And secondly, I would like to re-emphasize the one point that, yes, the minister level dialogue is quite important. And the local officer, especially the local army military commanders officer, the mechanism is also important. But we need some more pragmatic and policy level. That means the DG level dialogue and discussion between the two foreign affairs ministers or to the national defense ministries, so they can try to make the contribution for the CBM. But let me emphasize another point that the LAC is serve the purpose to maintain the situation, not to serve the purpose to solve the problem. LAC only recognize the current situation, doesn't reflect the stance and the policy of each government on where the border should be. So it takes a long time and requires a very strong political determination. So that's the reason why we hope the two governments and top leaders, they can take the more wisdom measures or the steps to push this issue forward. I don't think we can rely on the grassroots local officers for them to solve the problem. Far away from that.
Got it. And finally, before we go, very quickly from every one of you, how the two countries should resist temptations from other countries who are powers in the world, trying to make a big fuss out of this small-scale skirmishes between China and India, and try to take advantage of it for their own benefits. I think that's a crucial question too. But very quickly from every one of you, Professor Kantapali, please.
The U.S. President Trump had tweeted that he would like to mediate, but India and China rejected that offer. And yesterday, there was the Russian foreign minister who said that India and China have enough maturity to discuss these issues. I think overall, there has been an emphasis that this can be resolved by China and India at their own bilateral level.
All right, Mr. Ye.
I totally agree with Professor Kanabali. I think that both countries has enough wisdom to solve the problem. And this for the very short comment that I don't think these two countries need a third-party engagement or the interview.
I see. Last but not least, Mr. Hu.
Anyway, be aware of any third party's involvement, because any third parties will have its own interests, own sometimes ulterior motives.
Thank you for the three of you, cool-minded people in the know, helping us to understand the latest situation. Really appreciate it. All the best. And may peace be with us. Hu Shisheng, Ye Hailin, Sri Kantapali. Thank you so much.